Not too bad, guys. Root lift. I want to point out in terms of making sure our hole depth is correctly. Notice we measured where this tree kind of flares out here. So this is called the root flare. This is really important. Whenever you're planting your tree, you want to make sure you're not burying the root flare. The tree naturally flares out there, right? Very beautiful. The tree actually breathes through its root flare, so we don't want to bury it in dirt and essentially suffocate it. It'll also, if you plant it too deep, put out little kind of like feeder roots, which aren't very structurally sound, and that wouldn't be good either. We want our tree to use its actual roots way down here. So when we measured before we put it in, that's what we were looking at, is to make sure this root flare is not buried down in our hole. Okay, so now that we got it in our hole, we want to make sure our tree's straight. If you guys can look at each direction here and let me know if it's straight or if we need to fix it and straighten it. Looking at the branching to make sure that our branching looks pretty good. We're thinking about most of the branches going parallel to the street or sidewalk so they're not jutting out into traffic. That looks good. How do we think? We put it fairly straight? Looking good? Cool, yeah. Awesome. Yeah, we're looking to make sure our tree is fairly straight. Doesn't have to be perfect. They all have curves to them, but we're mainly looking at this lower half to make sure it's straight. Okay, now that we know our tree is in the hole, it's the correct depth, and it's straight, we're going to take this metal caging off. So the metal caging comes off. It's actually initially put on so that way when this tree is brought down to the nursery, it can stay nicely wrapped up in one piece. When we plant the tree, we take this caging off, the outer portion of it off entirely, because we want the tree's roots to be able to grow outward and spread out, and the caging could prevent it from doing that. I'm going to tilt it. Sean's going to put some dirt in there. I'm going to tuck it underneath that side. And we'll recheck it. A little too much? Or is it about good? Now that we know our tree is straight, we are going to take this burlap off. Some of the burlaps that the nurseries use it is compostable, but not always. That's one reason why we take it off. The other thing is the burlap itself actually wicks away moisture. And this tree is going to need a lot of water, especially for the first 2 to 3 years, so it can reestablish its roots. Fun fact, this tree only has about 20% of its roots with it today. The other 80% are back in the nursery where they dug the tree up. So it's going to need a lot of water to reestablish those 80% of its roots. And this burlap will wick away moisture and make that hard for the tree. So we're going to cut this off. It's going to be very similar to the caging. She's cutting down and all the way around, so there will be a little bit on that very bottom, and that's fine. But she's going to take off as much of it as she can get. Okay, and once you got all of your packaging off of it, it's time to fill in the hole. All the dirt that we have here is going to go back into the hole, believe it or not. I know it looks like it won't, it'll fit in there. We'll throw some in there, and then I think you saw earlier Sean stuck his foot in there. We're going to tamp this down, and we're doing this around the root ball. We're not going to step on the root ball. You're stepping in that space in between. That's helping get some of those air pockets out, pack in the dirt, and help stabilize the tree. Get a little bit in there, step on it. Put a little bit in, step on it. Our last step is going to be to mulch our tree. The amount of mulch kind of varies depending on the size we got here. With this tree pit, we're probably doing about 5 to 6 buckets. We use mulch that is natural. It doesn't have dye in it. We call it double shredded, but we really don't need any of the dye in the mulch is the big thing. The big thing I want everybody to learn when they watch this video is to not volcano mulch your trees. That's really bad for the trees. Remember earlier in the video I mentioned about our root flare and that we don't want to bury it. So the last thing we want to do is plant at the right depth and then bury it in mulch. Like I said, the tree actually breathes through its root flare, so that's one of the reasons why we don't want to bury it. The other thing is the little microorganisms inside this shredded up bark here, they don't know the difference between that and the bark of the tree. And they'll actually kind of eat away at this layer of bark, and it could open up for pests and diseases. So notice, I made sure we had a nice little bowl shape around the base of our tree, keeping the mulch back and away from it. That'll also catch a little bit of water as well. The mulch has a lot of great benefits too. So we mulch our trees because it helps retain moisture, helps with temperature control, it breaks down and feeds the tree. It also helps with compaction, helps keep weeds down. So a lot of really great benefits, and that's why you want to make sure you're mulching your trees.